Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan. Most people on the internet call me Cook, and I'm here today to talk to you about Bucket, which is a brand spanking new data management extension. And the main thing I do is I run this organization called Weird Gloop, and we mostly do video game wikis. And the things that are relevant here are that we, well, until recently, spoiler alert, have extremely heavy usage of Semantic MediaWiki, and video game wikis operate on a shockingly large scale. Like, I don't think we're actually doing things that are more important than any of you guys, but there's the amount of readers and pages and traffic is just kind of absurd. And what that means is we end up being very sensitive to performance in kind of an extreme way. And I don't know for sure, I don't want to make this claim without doing the proper research, but it's entirely possible that we are the single biggest user of Semantic MediaWiki, not in terms of anything that matters, but in terms of like CPU cycles. So, yeah, so Bucket is this new extension that we made, and it lives in sort of a similar space as Semantic MediaWiki and Cargo, where the whole big idea is we're going to write data from one article and we're going to query it from others in sort of interesting, useful ways. And it stores data in explicit database tables, very similar to Cargo, and it's very limited in scope. The initial intent of Bucket was to do the absolute minimum in the extension so that there's some sort of reasonable way to do the things that we, for the RuneScape and Minecraft and a couple other wikis, used Semantic MediaWiki for. And on my own kind of, I think for this group might be a bit of a hot take, which is I really don't like putting features in extensions if there's really any other reasonable way to do it. If you can fit it into Lua or JavaScript or something that is more generally accessible to people who are actually editing the wikis, you're going to have a much better time and have fewer forks and fewer just Byzantine errors. And so Bucket is also very opinionated. We try, this is easier said than done, but we try to give people exactly one reasonable way to do things, because when you have 3 different ways to do things, you end up with Perl or Ruby or something that just, everyone has slightly different opinions. And part of this, one example of being opinionated here is it's primarily accessed through Lua bindings. It's not, parser functions. I mean, there are APIs and things, but the expectation is that most of the time you're going to be using this, it's going to be through Scribuntu. I don't know how to say that. Everyone has a different idea on that last syllable. And the last thing is, Bucket is extremely focused on speed and performance, and not taking up more of your parse time, not taking up more of your resources than is absolutely necessary. And just so we're all on the same page, I want to just give an example of the problem we're trying to solve when I say, write data on one page, query it from others. So let's say you have a shop in a video game. This is from RuneScape, and the shop sells a bunch of Warhammers. And you can see this template is going to give you the data that says what the price is, what the stock is, what the item names are. And a key point is this is just wiki text here. We're not into the Bucket part yet. This is wiki text, and if people want to change it, the thing they do is they just edit the template the same way you would any other template. And then some magic things happen, and whether it's Semantic MediaWiki or Cargo or Bucket, everyone has different magic things for what these arrows are doing. And that somehow is going to store some data in the database. And then when it comes time to do something that queries that data, you might want to do sort of the inverse query where you say, okay, I'm on the Bronze Warhammer page. I want to get every shop that sells Bronze Warhammers. Let's just grab all of that data and display it back in a table some way. And the reading, again, has some magic. It's going to be different depending on what extension you use, but that's all it is. We're not trying to model the world. We're not really necessarily interested in semantic triples or really complicated ideas of how knowledge should be modeled. It really is just about being able to effectively store data in one place and query it in another. And I promise you, this is mostly not a tutorial, but just to make it a little bit more concrete, this is the idea behind the syntax. You define a bucket, which is essentially just a schema of what the fields are. And when it comes time to write the data, again, we are on the right side here, we're in Lua, you do put and you specify all the fields. And when you want to select things, we use a query builder that looks fairly similar to what you'd get from any sort of like JavaScript framework or anything. And we try and keep that aspect of it as simple as possible and as familiar as possible to people who have experience with just coding in general. And so something you might ask is, why not just keep using Semantic MediaWiki? Because we've been using SMW a lot for, I think, about 11 years. And the point of this isn't to, talk about how great our thing is and how SMW is terrible, but just about how there are specific aspects of it that we felt were starting to be a problem for us. So for starters, 75% of all of the database load on our entire cluster is from Semantic MediaWiki. A lot of that load is sort of unnecessary. I'll get into what aspects of it are unnecessary later. And everything, like, you can scale up your web servers and a lot of other aspects of your cluster really nicely, but it's usually a lot harder to scale up the database. So this makes the database load sort of, in some ways, more important than parse load or anything else that contributes to that. And Semantic MediaWiki also does a lot of unexpected, weird things to core MediaWiki. If you guys have ever had to deal with that, whether that's doing its own separate parsing passes, there's some kind of insane things that it does to split the parser cache depending on like user language. You can ask me about this later, but it turns out that making redirects on a wiki that uses Semantic MediaWiki, even if no other part of it is involved with SMW, can really just completely destroy your wiki in some very unexpected ways. And at least for us, most issues with MediaWiki upgrades end up being, in some arcane way, actually related to Semantic MediaWiki. And it takes usually a lot of time and sweat to figure out what those are, but it's very complicated. And I don't want to be depressing here, but the long-term outlook in terms of how Semantic MediaWiki is going to deal with the significant changes that are coming to MediaWiki at some point down the line. They've been saying it's happening in 2 years for about a decade, but the long-term outlook with regard to parsoid, to PHP changes is unclear. And I know there's a talk, I think, on Friday that is going to go into a bit more detail about sort of what the long-term outlook is. But there's enough risk here that we decided, okay, we can do one of two things. We can put a ton of effort into trying to make Semantic MediaWiki really performant, or we can try and make like a really self-enclosed piece of software that is probably going to end up being like 2,000 lines of code, relatively small, that might solve all of our problems. So that's what we ended up doing. And the point of this talk is not to be, hey, Bucket is great, you should use it. In fact, there's a slide at the end that is all about why you really shouldn't use it right now. I'm more interested in talking about design decisions, just because I think if you agree with some of these, this might be a good fit for you. And if you don't, I look forward to arguing about it over dinner. And I don't know, I think there's not enough discussion about what these extensions should look like sometimes and who the users are. So here's a couple of them. Number one, we're not trying to match the feature set that SMW and Cargo has. So there's a ton of things that both of those do that are, I'm sure, useful for some people, but we specifically just ended up not having to use them. So complicated display formats, data types, drill downs. The big idea from us is we want to expose primitives and let the user sort of massage the data further in Lua if they need it, because realistically, with the way we are sort of forcing you to do things, you're probably already using Lua. And same thing with both writes and reads. The writes are usually going to be happening at the end of some pretty long template. So we're really trying to keep the feature set very, very small. And this is probably a hot take, but we're really focusing on power users. I really think it's okay to design the reading and writing for this type of data management for people who are already using Scribuntu and for whom standard programming concepts like forcing them into Lua query builders is not some scary, bizarre thing, but is actually reasonably familiar. It's still important to have straightforward ways to view the data. You don't want to force people to, I don't know, pull up a database query engine somewhere to see what is stored there. But there's not that many special pages. I think there's a total of 3 special pages across all of Bucket for just mostly viewing data, not creating, not doing any really meaningful querying, but just seeing what the data looks like. And this is a big one, is minimizing the manual state management that users need to handle. So changes to templates, modules, anything that is changing the data that is being stored, ideally, this should eventually just work after the job queue runs and just mows down all of the reparses that it has to do. Schema changes are harder, but still eventually consistent, and this is, I think, notably different than at least how Cargo works. I think Semantic MediaWiki also has some issues there. We really, really don't want users to have to run their own reparsing bots or have to click a button to rebuild a table. The goal is to make everything just eventually consistent with minimal overhead. So those are some of the design decisions. If you like them, then this might be a good fit. If you don't, then that's totally okay. I'm not trying to save everyone. And another area I really want to talk about here is performance optimizations, and why I talked a little bit about why we care about this, just because there's a huge amount of savings to make the whole thing a little bit faster. But more generally, I think performance in data management extensions is a really underappreciated aspect of what makes managing wikis hard. And I would like to talk to everyone a little bit more. Okay, not literally everyone. I'd like to talk to anyone who is interested in this topic about sharing whatever tricks that we have, whatever tricks they have, because I think there's a lot that all of us are leaving on the table that would make managing this stuff a lot more effective. So optimization number 1, most of the time that you are parsing a page or trying to save some data into any of these extensions, nothing is changing. You're actually just saving the same data as you already had. And a huge chunk of the database heaviness from Semantic MediaWiki and Cargo is from data writes that essentially end up not doing anything. And the whole thing is honestly not very clever. Bucket is really intended to be as straightforward as possible, but the one clever thing that we do, the one sort of caching element we have, is we just hash all of the bucket data for a given page, and we store that, and if that matches what is already on disk, we kind of just don't do anything else. And what this means is most page parsers, at least the ones that don't change the data, make about 2 queries total to really cheap, very fast bucket-related tables, and that's all they do. Number 2, batching is better than caching. So database I/O in MediaWiki is not concurrent, which just means it can't do a bunch of things at once. If you need to make a bunch of queries in a row, it's going to go off and get one, come back, get the next one, come back, repeat 1,000 times. This is in sort of more general computer science, this is often referred to as the n+1 problem. And what this means is that if the time it takes to get to your database and back is some small number, even if it's only a millisecond, that actually really starts to add up if you're doing it 3,000 times. And this is the root cause of a huge portion of performance issues across all of MediaWiki. People always talk about how not performant DPL is, and how it's just one of the most ridiculous extensions ever, but it's actually, most of the problems there are fixable examples of this, where it's looping over all of the rows in an output and just getting data, coming back, getting data, coming back. And a lot of people think that what this means is the database itself is slow, and they create sort of complex caching mechanisms through other pieces of tech that you have access to in MediaWiki. But the underlying problem isn't really database related at all. It's that you're doing n things when you could be doing 1. So if you can write the queries that the extension is doing specifically in a way that you're not repeatedly going back and forth, and you're actually asking for all of the data at once, you get really shockingly good results. The last thing is we want to avoid extension-specific reparses at all costs. This is one of probably my biggest bugaboo. A lot of MediaWiki performance issues are just from extensions triggering their own parses of pages because they think they need them at a specific point in time. But generally, this is not really that necessary, because whenever you change a template in a module, anything like that, it's going to cause all of the pages that use it to get reparsed. Refresh links is sort of the most popular job that does this. And it's rarely necessary because almost always you can put hooks at the end of this refresh links job that already has the output of this parse and will happily share it with you so long as you don't just throw it away. So Bucket will never trigger parsers on its own. There's no code path where that's even possible. So we ended up developing this year. This is all really quite new. Bucket was written mostly between April and September of this year, and we migrated all of the weird gloop wikis from using Semantic MediaWiki to Bucket. We turned off Semantic MediaWiki about 3 weeks ago. And there's a few lessons that I think might be useful for anyone who is doing any sort of migration of any extension for MediaWiki, is make sure whatever feature set you have for your new thing actually covers your usages. We didn't run into too many issues here, but it's a really good idea if you're committing to changing something out, making sure that every usage you have actually fits that, even if it means spending weeks and weeks and weeks finding all of the asks and shows that are part of Semantic MediaWiki. And it ended up being a multi-step process to do the migration in sort of the classic way where you start writing to both things, then you switch the readers from Semantic MediaWiki to Bucket, and then you remove the SMW writes. And this is great, except if you have any third-party API users, which video game wikis have a shockingly large and very annoying set of these. You cannot change their reads in a really straightforward way. You need to leave a lot of time left over to let them switch and give them ample time where you say, hey, a month from now, this is going to break. Please change this. Really, that we would have gotten this done about a month earlier if we didn't have third-party API users. One other thing is it's incredibly useful to automatically compare, do some sort of diffing between your old state and your new state. This is, I think, a really underutilized technique for just making sure you don't break weird edge cases that are currently on your wiki. And whatever format that takes, whether you're comparing the HTML output or the underlying data, whatever makes sense for you, it's almost always worth doing as opposed to just trying to spot check things, because there are going to be weird cases that end up coming up. Last thing is, I promise you, if you make anything, people will immediately start using it in really messed up ways. We had someone on the League of Legends wiki who decided, actually, this page is not parsing fast enough. I'm going to try and cache sub-elements of this page in Bucket. It doesn't make any sense at all if you think about where that ends up going. But you're guaranteed to get just bizarre use cases of anything you make. And so the final results, this ended up being 2,300 lines of PHP. We estimated 2,000. It came up a little bit high. The overall database usage from parses dropped about 70%. And what this meant is it allowed us to quadruple the number of job runners that we were able to run at once, because if you do the math, that essentially leaves the maximum database usage the same. Quadrupling the number of job runners means things just propagate way faster. And I was saying earlier that Semantic MediaWiki hooks itself into a lot of things that don't explicitly have anything to do with SMW. And one of the results of that is by removing it, and not even switching to Bucket, but just like removing Semantic MediaWiki, is that the user wait time, the latency for all requests across the entire wiki is down about 20% globally. And this is probably my favorite part, is that editor confusion about query syntax has gone way down. I had been using Semantic MediaWiki for 10 years, and I still couldn't tell you all of the things that colons and pluses and dashes and just like, I don't know all the things that those do. And if any of you do, please tell me. It's a simpler syntax for doing the set of things that we need for data management. So I said this slide was coming. There's a lot of reasons why you probably shouldn't use this, at least right now. Number one is we support repeated fields, similar thing that Cargo does. In SMW, they're called subobjects. The way we do it works great for us and works really badly for anyone that isn't using a fairly specific version of MySQL. And I thought this meant that people would just say, oh, okay, I guess we're just not going to use it. It turns out what it means is they're going to find the hackiest possible way to do like full table scans of all of the data, and they install it, and then they're wondering, why is this slow all of a sudden? So we're changing out the way the repeated fields work to be sort of a more standard, existing, like denormalized database schema. And it's also still possible to write very inefficient queries. I think, for what it's worth, this is true of any data management extension you make. Any sort of queries that use ORs can be really hard for the query optimizer to do something effective with. And it often results in full table scans, which are so much worse than, however bad you think they are, they will hammer you just ridiculously hard. One other thing is, invalidating queries after data updates is really, really hard. So if you have, I don't know, a table of all of the things that sell a bronze Warhammer, then you make a new page for a new shop that sells it. This is, I would argue, probably the hardest problem in database design, period, is invalidating the results of those queries based on changes coming through. We don't do this right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any data management extension that actually fully handles that. And it would be cool to do it, but there's like billion-dollar companies that only focus on this, and they still don't do a very good job, so I'm not sure if it's going to happen. Another thing is that we don't want external users yet. There will be a time where that makes sense, but mostly because of the repeated fields implementation eventually being completely swapped out. It's really, really hard to change the API surface of the whole extension when you don't control the inputs, when you can't just say, okay, everyone that's using this, destroy your tables and rebuild them. We're actually going to, if you have to provide like a reasonable migration path for a v0 point something, then it just really, it probably makes the whole thing like 3 or 4 times slower. So yeah, don't use Bucket yet, but keep an eye on where it goes in the next few months. I'm really hopeful that I'm hopeful that it's fast for everyone, I guess is the main thing. That's about all I got. I have one last thing to say that has nothing to do with Bucket, because I didn't really come here to evangelize about this MediaWiki extension. I'm much more interested in talking to more of you here about where the overlap is in the things we need for the stuff that we want to make. I've been talking to the guy that is rewriting DPL, dynamic page list, and it turns out that all of the problems that he has had related to database security and having to deal with SQL injection, almost all of those are the exact same problems that we had, and we all had to work around the fairly limited things that were available in query builders in MediaWiki core. This is just one example. I really have the sense that a lot of us are working around the exact same problems, and if we just talk to each other a little bit more, we could come up with way more effective ways to solve them. That's about it. Thank you very much.
Great. Do we have any questions?
So how did you manage the migration with those communities? I mean, did it just tell them, hey, here's something new, or
yeah. So
how did that happen?
We're in a sort of unique position where I didn't go into a ton of detail about what Weird Gloop is and where it came from, but all of us are just like RuneScape nerds that were doing that for a very long time. So we're sort of still, the people that would be doing that migration are still basically us. It turns out that most of the other wikis that we have were not really super, with the exception of Minecraft, we're not super heavily using SMW. It was like a couple places here and there, and they weren't attached enough to it or opinionated enough to be concerned about it. Minecraft was a little bit more complicated, mostly because it's not just one wiki, it's like 14 different languages, and they all kind of had to slowly get there on their own. I don't recall anyone being upset about having to switch. It was more it was just, how do we do it? At least in my experience, the communities are shockingly down to go ahead and work on things if they think it will make our lives easier. I don't really know why that is, but I'm happy with it. Yeah.
There is a question in the chat. It can be four. It is from XXMaryJNW. Would it be possible for Bucket to be schemaless? Part of the power of Semantic MediaWiki is that you do not have to specify a schema and can just store arbitrary data. Is this also possible with Bucket?
I think that would be hard given the current technical implementation, because the underlying representation is it is database tables that have a well-defined set of columns, and I could imagine a world where you move more towards like a NoSQL, like MongoDB sort of situation where you're way less opinionated, or you do like semantic triples, the way that Semantic MediaWiki does. But that gets very complicated to make efficient, and at least in our experience, we had a lot of concerns about are there things that don't fit in the schema? Are you going to run into all sorts of things where you need to come up with these horribly complicated joins or repeating fields a bunch of times? At least in our experience, for specifically video game wikis, I don't want to claim this is true for everyone else. In our experience, this was not as necessary as we were concerned about, so the implementation ended up working.
I think he was before.
Hello. All right. Okay. Okay. Well.
You guys go at the same time.
Okay. Oh yeah, I'll go to. Hello.
Hi.
It's no argument from me that SMW can be slow and inefficient and what's funny? Okay. What was it? Slow, inefficient, and confusing of syntax and various other sins. I'm less persuaded that cargo is not a good fit for your needs. Of course,
Yeah.
I'm biased. I mean, if you're talking, what were the specific things you said that it doesn't update, the table doesn't update
Yeah, so
automatically?
my biggest concern with cargo is just the change propagation, like the fact that it doesn't propagate changes with refresh links. And maybe this has changed, but like when I looked, I think we may have emailed back and forth about this in like 2022. At least when I looked at it, the only way you could cause data to change is by actual edits to pages or rebuilding the entire table. And that ended up not being a good fit for us, because when the thing that is doing the writing is a Lua module, for example, which was the case for us long before we used Bucket. If you change something about that module that changes the outputs, there's not actually a straightforward way to get that to be reflected in the underlying data unless you do a rebuild.
Yeah. So I mean, if it's just a matter of every save to a template causing, you want the data table to be recreated when that happens.
Well, I prefer it not be because the problem with recreation is that means reparse everything that writes to this table, or everything that uses a template that is attached to the table, right? And that is very extreme from my perspective. It doesn't, and it's also not using the parses that already existed for. Where did I talk about this? It's not using the parse that refresh links does. And one of the biggest realizations for me was, oh my God, these parses are happening. This isn't cargo specific, by the way, but just across all of MediaWiki. These parses are getting thrown away. Wouldn't it be cool if we could reuse them? And that is sort of why it doesn't have to use any parsing. For what it's worth, I think this is solvable in cargo world. Like, I don't think this is like some design decision that it would be impossible to make it reuse the parses that are already happening from the job queue. But it was not, as presented, with just only allowing rebuilds and edits, it wasn't a good fit for us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we should talk
Yeah,
more.
I figure we will.
I feel like there's something I'm missing in
Yeah.
how the whole data structure is put together. I just have one other question, which is, how do you handle fields that hold the list of values?
Yeah. So I talked about this a little bit here. Repeated fields, the way we do it, and.
Wait, I think that's different. Although it could be.
I think we're talking about the same thing, but using different terminology.
Well, there's multiple instance templates or whatever you want to call, where it's a whole
I'm not
array
talking
of
about like sub-object world. I'm talking about like if you have a set of ingredients for a recipe, is probably a better fit. I think that's.
Well, with
Or like
ingredients,
authors,
it's
right?
complicated because you have more than one value.
Okay, I mean, let's say
Or
like you're talking about like authors. Of
Sure,
a book,
fine,
right?
authors of a book,
So
yeah.
so that's what I'm talking about when I say
I
repeated
see, okay.
fields. So this is very, very subject to change. The way we do it right now actually uses multi-valued indexes, which are only available in MySQL
I see.
8.0.18
Okay, now I get it.
or something. And they're great if you can do that, and if you can't, then it's just horrible. So we're trying to make it not horrible for everyone.
All right.
Probably by doing like a probably close to what Cargo is doing, where you normalize it and have an ID for each of it, and you do joins.
All right, I'll try to make this quick. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you've explained the paradigm of you want to try to do as core as possible, as vanilla as possible, and I can totally see why that's why you are using Lua. Now, the thing is what's it called? Scribunto is faster, right?
Yeah.
And compared to like templates, and that's why it's a good option. But that being said, Lua is still not the fastest option on earth. So my question is, what is the trade-off that you've done by choosing Lua as the implementation that still adds slowness to it compared to the ease that it offers? Like, would there have been another solution that you could have implemented that doesn't use Lua, that does go deeper, that does save more CPU?
I don't. So this is a very interesting topic because doing a large amount of logic is just probably 20 times faster in Scribunto than it is in just like core MediaWiki parser functions.
Sorry, faster to write or faster to process?
Faster to process.
Okay.
I assume that's what you're more asking about, right?
I'm open to anything.
Okay. The main downside of like going into Lua world is you do incur like a 1 or 2 millisecond cost of just switching over to that for every time you do like an invoke. If you're only staying in Lua world, that's fine, but if you're like constantly switching back and forth, then it really does start to add up. So if you're doing something really, really small, it's actually usually better to do it in wiki text than it is to do it in Lua. Are you asking like why didn't we do it in like C or like PHP or something? Or
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's at some point you just make it really, really hard for people to use. And at least in our experience, Lua is well in the realm of things that people are happy to use. But if it's like you need to, I don't know, write some C code and then we'll like include it in the next like deployment that we do, that would just be like an absurd barrier to entry, I think.
Okay, makes sense. This was not meant to be a trick question. I got
No,
you.
it's. I mean, I do care about performance, but only to a point. You really, really need to balance that against what makes things easy to use. And one of my hottest takes is that there's like a core difference between a lot of like enterprise use of these data management extensions and at least how we use it, which comes down to what the source of truth is. So if the source of truth is whatever values are in a template somewhere and random people playing the game need to edit them, then this works pretty well. If your source of truth is like some third-party JSON blob or like a CSV or something that comes from the business logic, then this is a bad fit. I would argue that there's just like a core distinction there that I don't think has like really been understood well enough by everyone, where people are like, why don't you have use page forms or some other thing where you can edit the data in this other thing that isn't wiki text? And for me, the issue there is you're kind of now forcing, maybe not forcing, but you're giving people two ways to do things, and they're already going to need to know how wiki text works anyway. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to know the thought process more fully. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Last question, because it's funny you mentioned about the bad fit.
But we have to close.
My last question was, so how easily does this facilitate, copying over Grand Exchange current prices and then
This
rendering
is a
them?
RuneScape coded question. We don't use this for Grand Exchange stuff. That it's actually all in. We can talk about it later. We use JSON for that, and this is actually a great example where the source of truth is not the wiki, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh. Sorry. We can. Whatever works. I'm at your mercy.
Okay, like program-wise, we have 10 minutes break now. Bernhard, do you have an announcement about the program? No? Question? Okay. This is obviously a very hot topic because I think everyone is interested in optimization and ideas like that. But we do have then another hour, and I want people to stay, concentrated. So what I would suggest is that we take like a 10-minute, short break so people can have a breather. And anyone who wants to talk more to Jonathan is around. And there's also dinners and all the other things. And Jonathan, there's also a hot debate online, so maybe you can also look online.
Wow, okay. Oh, I love this.
Okay. No, that's it.
Tell me who
We're
it is. I'll
sticking
find
to
him.
the time. That's it. No exceptions.
Okay.
Okay, 10-minute short break, and then we continue with more talks.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.